For decades, Republican loyalty to a sitting president has been regarded as one of the most stable elements in American politics. Strong party loyalty has provided a foundation of support that leaders of both major parties have relied upon to sustain their agendas, build consensus, and face opposition. However, a new Pew Research Center survey released on January 29, 2026, reveals a surprising and potentially consequential shift in the political landscape. Even President Donald Trump's most devoted supporters within the Republican Party are beginning to express skepticism about his leadership, his policy choices, and his overall direction. The data from this poll offer a complex picture of a president whose base, and indeed his entire political coalition, may be showing signs of strain. As we unpack the results of the survey and analyze their broader implications, it becomes clear that this is not just a small fluctuation in approval numbers, but rather a possible structural shift in the GOP's relationship with its most prominent figure. According to the Pew Research Center poll, President Trump's overall approval rating sits at approximately 37%. This figure represents a modest decline from the previous fall, when his approval rating was slightly higher. While a 3-point drop might not seem dramatic at first glance, the deeper context of the numbers reveals more troubling trends. Approval ratings are not just abstract indicators of popularity, they are barometers of trust, confidence, and political momentum. An approval rating in the high 30s suggests that a majority of Americans do not endorse the president's performance. And when paired with specific drops in policy support and base enthusiasm, these numbers take on greater significance. The survey further found that only 27% of U.S. adults currently say they support the policy prescriptions put forward by the Trump administration. This represents a decline from 35% when Trump returned to the White House a little over a year ago. Policy support is a crucial metric because it reflects how the public perceives the substance of governance rather than personality or rhetoric. When fewer Americans endorse the direction in which their president is steering the country, it signals weakening confidence in his ability to achieve tangible results. This is particularly important in the context of economic and social issues that have dominated public discourse. What might be more troubling than the overall dip in approval and policy support is where the decline is coming from. Much of the erosion, according to Pew researchers, stems from growing frustration among Trump's usually loyal base, Republican voters who, in previous years, have shown high levels of unwavering support for the president's agenda. In 2025, approximately 67% of Republicans said they supported all or most of Trump's ideas. That figure was one of the pillars of Trump's political strength, demonstrating a solid internal consensus that helped him push through initiatives, maintain party cohesion, and mobilize grassroots enthusiasm. However, by early 2026, that figure had dropped to about 56%. This shift represents an 11 percentage point decline in support among the president's own party, a stark indicator of shifting sentiments within the GOP base. The significance of this trend should not be understated. Political loyalty is not easily shaken in modern American politics, especially among core supporters who have historically remained steadfast despite controversy or opposition. For those loyalists to begin expressing discontent suggests that something deeper is happening than typical partisan fluctuation. It indicates that critical segments of the Republican electorate are reassessing their relationship with the president, questioning his performance, and signaling a desire for change or redirection. A further dimension of the Pew data reveals that Americans, by a 2-to-1 margin, say the Trump administration's actions have made conditions worse rather than better. This broad dissatisfaction encompasses not only policy outcomes, but public perception of how effectively government is addressing key national challenges. These include economic issues, immigration, public safety, and social tensions. The combination of these feelings contributes to a narrative of disillusionment that spans across ideological lines, but which is now encroaching upon the Republican base in a way not previously seen at this point in Trump's presidency. Several factors may help explain why frustration is rising among Republicans. One of the most visible concerns relates to the economy and the administration's response to longstanding issues of affordability and prosperity. Trump has spent considerable time crisscrossing the country, promoting his economic record, and assuring voters that prosperity has returned. He has highlighted initiatives designed to make homeownership more accessible, including an executive order issued on January 20th, 2026, that seeks to ban Wall Street investors from purchasing single-family homes, a move aimed at curbing speculative buying and lowering housing costs for ordinary Americans. Trump has also indicated a desire to bring down interest rates and make it easier for Americans to purchase homes, framing these efforts as evidence of economic progress. Despite these efforts, the Pew poll suggests that these messages are not resonating broadly with the public. Only a minority of adults express support for the administration's policy direction, and the drop in approval among Republicans points to a growing belief that economic realities have not improved as promised. This disconnect between rhetoric and lived experience is a central theme in the broader pattern of dissatisfaction. Voters frequently make judgments not just based on intentions, but on outcomes. When the lived economic experience of a significant portion of the population does not align with presidential messaging, it erodes confidence, even among those who might have been predisposed to support the president. Importantly, this economic frustration is occurring alongside other contentious issues that have heightened public tension. Immigration enforcement, in particular, has sparked widespread debate and civil unrest. Actions taken by immigration officers, including a controversial incident in Minnesota that resulted in the fatal shooting of 2 U.S. citizens, have drawn sharp criticism from many corners of the political spectrum. These events have fueled narratives of excessive force, civil rights concerns, and a failure to balance enforcement with compassion. Such controversies are not isolated. They feed into a larger sense of dissatisfaction with how governance is being conducted. Another factor contributing to Republican frustration is the release of files related to disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein. These disclosures have sparked intense discussion and, in some cases, frustration among conservative-leaning members of Congress who believe transparency and accountability are paramount. Some GOP lawmakers have openly bucked the president's stance on how these files should be handled, signaling a willingness to challenge Trump's approach even at the risk of internal party tension. This dynamic suggests that Republican leaders themselves are increasingly sensitive to the concerns of constituents who may not be wholly aligned with the president's methods or priorities. Beyond specific policy controversies, the broader nature of Trump's leadership style may also play a role in growing dissatisfaction. Trump's approach has been characterized by bold rhetoric, frequent public attacks on critics, and an emphasis on personal loyalty. While this style has energized many supporters in the past, it may also contribute to frustration when policy outcomes fall short of expectations. Populist leaders often rely on strong emotional bonds with their supporters, which can amplify disappointment when those supporters feel promises have gone unfulfilled. In such cases, loyalty can become contingent on results rather than allegiance to personality alone. The historical context offers additional insight into the significance of these trends. Presidential approval ratings and base support have fluctuated throughout American history, but declines driven primarily by erosion within a leader's own party have often foreshadowed more significant political consequences. For example, midterm elections following periods of base dissatisfaction have frequently resulted in losses for the president's party in Congress, shifts in party dynamics, and realignments in voter coalitions. In 1994, for instance, a significant drop in public confidence contributed to a wave election that saw Republicans gain control of both houses of Congress. Similar patterns emerged in 2010, when discontent with the presidency of Barack Obama translated into substantial Republican gains in the House of Representatives. While it is premature to draw precise parallels between those historical moments and the current political landscape, the existence of eroding base support serves as an important warning signal. The fact that Republican voters are less unified behind Trump than they were a year ago suggests that the party's internal cohesion may be weakening at a time when external pressures are mounting. This combination of internal skepticism and external challenges creates a more complex and unpredictable political environment. Moreover, the Pew data indicate that frustrations are not limited to grassroots voters, but are reflected in attitudes toward Republican lawmakers as well. Only 38% of Republicans and Republican-leaning independents say that GOP lawmakers have an obligation to support Trump's ideas. By contrast, 61% assert that Republican lawmakers do not have such an obligation if they disagree with the president. This represents an increase from the previous year, when the Pew poll showed that 55% held that view. The shift suggests that a growing number of Republican voters believe their elected representatives should exercise independent judgment rather than follow the president's lead unquestioningly. This evolving sentiment has practical implications for the relationship between Trump and the Republican majority in Congress. A president's ability to enact his legislative agenda typically depends on the cooperation of his party's lawmakers. When lawmakers feel less bound to support the president, It can hinder efforts to pass major initiatives, reduce the effectiveness of party messaging, and create narratives of division that opponents can exploit. Congressional dissent also reflects broader strategic calculations by lawmakers who may be positioning themselves for future political opportunities or distancing themselves from what they perceive as potential liabilities. The convergence of these factors, declining approval ratings, economic frustration, controversy over immigration enforcement, dissatisfaction with policy outcomes, and a lack of enforced party loyalty, sets the stage for a more contentious and uncertain political environment as the 2026 midterm elections approach. For Democrats, these developments represent an opening. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer of New York, along with other Democratic leaders, have seized on public dissatisfaction to underline criticisms of the administration's performance. Democrats argue that economic hardships have not been alleviated at the pace promised, and that the country is being left to grapple with ongoing challenges without effective solutions. In the context of midterm elections, internal fractures within a president's party often translate into strategic advantages for the opposition. Candidates running for Congress or statewide office can point to intra-party divisions as evidence of a party out of step with the priorities of everyday Americans. They can highlight areas of disagreement within the party as proof that even core supporters are questioning the direction of leadership. Such narratives can be compelling to independent voters and moderate members of the opposing party, potentially influencing electoral outcomes in closely contested districts. Historical parallels also hint at the potential consequences of eroding base support. When a unified party base fractures, voter turnout can be affected, enthusiasm can wane, and previously safe seats can become competitive. In some cases, internal disputes can lead to primary challenges from different factions within the party, further diluting the strength of incumbents and dividing resources. The Republican Party's trajectory in the coming year may hinge on its ability to reconcile these internal disagreements, address the concerns of its base, and present a coherent message about the future. Moreover, the pattern of dissatisfaction appears to stem not merely from isolated issues, but from a broader perception among Republicans that policy and leadership have not fully delivered on long-standing promises. Trump's populist approach, once seen as a defining strength, may now be contributing to disappointment when the realities of governance collide with expectations set by campaign rhetoric. Unlike policy debates that revolve around technical details or ideological nuance, base dissatisfaction often arises from a fundamental mismatch between what supporters hoped would happen and what they perceive has actually occurred. Media coverage and public discourse play an important role in shaping these perceptions. Pew Research Center polls carry significant weight in journalistic and analytical circles, and media outlets across the political spectrum have highlighted the decline in Trump's approval among Republicans. Conservative news organizations, while often supportive of Trump's agenda, have nonetheless reported on internal debates and dissenting voices within the GOP. At the same time, mainstream outlets have underscored controversies and policy shortcomings. The result is a media environment in which data on public opinion is amplified and interpreted through competing narratives, making it harder for any one message to dominate unchallenged. The intersection of data, media coverage, and public sentiment creates a feedback loop that can accelerate shifts in political allegiance. When loyal supporters see repeated reports of declining approval and growing internal disagreement, it can reinforce their own doubts and contribute to further erosion of confidence. Conversely, for those who remain staunchly supportive, negative coverage can deepen a sense of embattlement. What is clear from the Pew poll data is that the dominant narrative of unwavering loyalty within the GOP is no longer an accurate reflection of reality. Examining presidential history, we find that loyalty trends can change rapidly when public expectations are unmet. Presidents who once enjoyed broad-based support have seen that support decline when economic conditions stagnated, when internal party unity frayed, or when controversial issues consumed political bandwidth. The current data suggests that similar dynamics may be at play with Trump's presidency. The decline in his base approval from 67% to 56% among Republicans signals a downturn in enthusiasm that could have cascading political effects. Looking ahead, there are several possible scenarios for how this trend might evolve. One possibility is that Trump and Republican leaders find ways to address the concerns of disaffected supporters and rebuild trust. This could involve policy adjustments, more effective communication strategies, or efforts to highlight tangible achievements that resonate with the base. If successful, such initiatives could stabilize internal loyalty and mitigate the erosion of support. Another possibility is that the Republican Party experiences a degree of factionalism in which different camps emerge. Some aligned closely with Trump's vision, others advocating for a post-Trump approach to governance and messaging. Such a divide could play out in primary elections, leadership contests, or strategic decisions about legislative priorities. Factionalism, while not inherently destructive, can complicate consensus and weaken the party's collective political leverage. A third scenario is that continued internal dissatisfaction translates into electoral consequences in the 2026 midterms. Lower levels of enthusiasm among Republican voters could lead to reduced turnout in key races, opening the door for Democratic challengers in competitive districts. This pattern has precedent in U.S. political history, where midterm elections have often served as referenda on presidential performance, especially when internal party cohesion is weak. It is important to note that none of these scenarios are predetermined. Political dynamics are inherently fluid, and leaders, strategists, and voters all play roles in shaping outcomes. What the Pew Research Center poll underscores is not an irreversible decline in support, but rather a shift in attitudes that requires attention and interpretation. Republicans who were once firm supporters of Trump are now signaling discomfort with aspects of his leadership. Whether that discomfort solidifies into long-term realignment, short-term dissatisfaction, or a renewed base commitment will depend on events, messaging, and the evolving political context over the coming year. In conclusion, the Pew Research Center poll provides a compelling snapshot of a moment in American politics where traditional assumptions about party loyalty and presidential support are being tested. President Trump's approval rating and policy backing have declined, with signs that the decline is driven in part by growing skepticism within his own party, the economic frustrations felt by many Americans, controversies surrounding immigration enforcement and other governance issues, and shifting attitudes among Republican voters and lawmakers alike contribute to a complex and uncertain political landscape. As the 2026 midterms approach, Republican leaders face important choices about how to respond to internal dissent, articulate policy success, and maintain electoral competitiveness. At the same time, the data offer opportunities for Democratic strategists and candidates seeking to capitalize on perceived weaknesses within the GOP coalition. Ultimately, the numbers reveal that unwavering base support is no longer guaranteed for the president, and that the future trajectory of American politics may be shaped as much by internal party dynamics as by external opposition. The evolving relationship between Trump and his base will be a defining feature of the 2026 political narrative, and perhaps a bellwether for broader trends in U.S. political alignment for years to come.